Nice new sort of glue I've been sort of using, and when it comes to photo etch, I love to use laser bond when it comes to photo etch. It just makes things so much more easier. Now, as we was just sort of sorting out here, just at the back we've got these two little tabs. We can sort of glue them in. So using our laser bond, what we can basically do is, because this, let's get this out of the way with the camera, what we could do, we could sort of just blob some, try and get some underneath there, both places. Now with this laser bond, basically this is not going to dry until we use the UV light, so we can play around with this. So if we get a cotton wool bud, what you can sort of see, hopefully, is we've got all this sort of blobbed, oozed sort of glue on the top of there. What we can do is get a cotton wool bud, we can wipe some of this up, right, and what I'm sort of hoping is that we've, you know, after I've wiped that up, we've got a nice little bit as maybe sort of got underneath those two little metal tabs there. And if we apply our UV now, we're going to get a much nicer sort of glue go on here. Alright, so let's get out the UV light and let's just make sure this is in place first. Right, and then we apply the UV light. Right, and we want to hold the UV light down for, it says in the instructions maybe about 3 to 7 seconds ish, but really the longer you can sort of keep this on, sort of the better, because, you know, it does take a little bit for the light to sort of penetrate in and underneath those two little tabs, so the longer the better. But basically that now is all nicely glued down and not really going anywhere, which this piece then, if I can just find where I've put all my pieces, here you go, will go, I do believe it goes underneath this bit, sort of at the back. There's like that little sort of raised piece which then goes into our little recess, which is probably not such a bad idea to sort of use. Again, tweezers, because bits of photo etch are rather tricky, and that's going to just sort of hopefully just pop in there, you know, rather sort of nicely. Hold on, sorry, you're off camera. Right, that's just going to pop in there quite nicely, and you don't have to worry about this side being at all messy with the tabs or the glue, because we're not going to see that. We're going to see this side. Right, this is the side we're going to see, and we're going to have like a nice little compass just inside there, which now moves us along to another part in the cockpit, which is rather cool, is the decals. So now the decals for the instrument display panels, right, this is the decals that you will get, and first impressions when you first see them is they're all just solid black. Don't worry, there hasn't been like a misprint or anything like that. The actual pattern is on sort of like the opposite side or something, and when we sort of do this, you'll see the dials and everything come through. So just off camera I've got just a bit of lukewarm water, right, and we're just going to let that now sit. And you really sort of, with Tamiya decals, you want to leave that to sit until it's properly sort of soaked in and absorbed and everything, because if we try sort of moving this now, you could potentially crack it quite easily with these decals, I have noticed. And then basically you get your clear part, which is just here, and what we want to do is on the side where you haven't got these sort of raised circles, right, and that's where the side you want to put your decal on. So let's let this soak in. So then all we've got to do is basically transfer over our decal onto here. I'm just putting a little bit of water on there just to help the process of it moving. Right, and what I'm going to do is, I mean, you can sort of slide, I mean, you probably should really just sort of slide the decal on here now. I mean, I do sometimes pick it up with a paintbrush, the little ones, but really this is probably the more safer way of doing it. So we've slid that on, right, and then we're going to sort of try and maneuver this now into the right position, right. And what you probably going to want to do is as you sort of move it, get some tweezers, turn it upside down, and hopefully, there you go, look at all them sort of dials and everything sort of showing through, which you couldn't see when it was on the decal paper. It's on the opposite side. So we want to sort of make sure that's maneuvered into the right position, and then we can sort of, well, then we can apply some decaling solution, which this just needs a little bit of a maneuver. It is a bit sort of tricky. You've got to sort of maneuver it, turn it over, and then just see, you know, maybe put it up to the light, just see if it's sort of in line. I mean, if you're feeling a bit sort of adventurous, maybe you could sort of maybe get a pin with it on a vise, and you just want to sort of try and maneuver. It is quite tricky. Alright, so it is kind of good to put it up to the light, and you basically want to get all your dials. Let's get you on camera. Where you going? You want to get all your dials sort of lined up with your front glass bit that's on there, and then let's put this upside down. Then because we're using Tamiya decals, using things like micro solid set doesn't normally work too well on them. You want to have something a little bit more stronger, like Mr. Mark softener. I'm just going to jump straight into the Mr. Mark softener, because you know, you're not really sort of seeing the decals, you're seeing them through the clear plastic. And what I'm going to do is, me personally, I like to take out this brush, because this brush is quite a sort of a rough sort of hard sort of brush. I like to use this nice sort of softer brush and dip this in, and then what we're going to do is just paint this carefully over the top, trying not to move it, because if we move it we're going to have to readjust the decal. Right, and then just don't touch it, just leave that. Just sort of what will happen basically is it'll wrinkle up and it'll sort of conform to anything, and it'll stick down sort of nice and solid, just like these ones I've done here. Right, as you can see, they've got their decals on the back, and if I just hold this into place and turn it over, you can basically see that what you're going to end up with is these really sort of proper looking dials, which sort of makes this, I mean, this kind of shows you what this kit's all about. I mean, you know, with other normal sort of kits, it's normally you just get decals, or you have to go out and buy photo etch. But with these, they've got this really cool system of putting decals on the back of clear parts and having them perfectly fit into a normal plastic piece, and it just comes through and looks like there's an actual dial there with a piece of glass on top. Looks really, really cool. So we want to sort of put them to one side now, because you can't really spray up our piece just here with these dials in, because you're going to spraying over the dials and everything. So we want to put them to one side, ready to just glue in once this has all basically been sprayed up. So just moving along now, we're going to be taking a look at the gun sight. Now this is quite a tiny piece. Now this is a clear bit of plastic because of this right here, this tiny little piece just at the top. The rest of this is going to be sprayed like black and cockpit interior green, but just on the top here we have the gun sight sort of thing going on here. Now you might be able to see I have sort of scraped off the seam line, because you do get a bit of a nasty seam line, a bit of flash, right? And all I've done is I've just scraped it across with my blade just to get rid of that little bit of a seam line that's just on there. Now we want this to be all sort of nice and shiny, to look like glass. So to do this, we're going to start off with some sanding sticks. So I'm going to start off with using the skinny stick here. I'm going to be using our blue one. It's got a nice sponge to it, so it will go with the curvature of a little bit of glass just on here. And we're just going to just nicely sand this across, just like so. Right, now it's all going to go pretty smoked out now, as you can just see there, but we've got rid of any sort of last bits of imperfections from that seam line. Next up, what we're going to do is I'm going to come in with our second standing stick. This is the one where we've got like a nice sort of fine grit It's a nice sponge, but on the opposite side you've got a bit of a polishing sort of grit on the underside, which is good to just start the process of polishing this up. And I'm trying to get you on camera with this because this is rather small. This is only like maybe 3mm across, right? And it's all about, when it comes to sort of getting see-through clear plastic, to, you know, have something like a scratch or a seam line, to get that to being, you know, crystal clear again, we've got to work our way through the different grits. Now we have another sanding stick here. This one starts off with a nice sort of buff inside, which sort of kind of gets us even, you know, further down, sort of like the grit. And this is the green side again. It's got that sponge to it, so it can go with the curvature. Then on the opposite side, we've got what is, it just absolutely feels really, really sort of smooth on this side, and this is what's going to polish it up. So we're just going to sort of buff away at this. Right, and really what you'll notice is that as you work your way through all these different sort of grits, right, this will go, I mean, as you can see before, that was rather smoky now, and it's sort of basically just slightly hazy there now, right? So we're just working our way through those grits, and then finally we come along with the polishing side, the white side, the really smooth side, right? And what you'll notice is this is going to really sort of shine up now, right? And the more you go at this, the more shiny it gets and everything. You might even start hearing a bit of a squeak, right? And that squeak is an indication that this is getting really nice and smooth. And as soon as I take this away now, hopefully you can sort of see how that has come up absolutely crystal clear, absolutely beautiful. And it's just a nice little tiny quick sort of detail that is just going to sort of bring things alive. You do all these tiny little details and it creates a whole, and you know, it just brings the whole cockpit alive. Not to say this cockpit doesn't need it, because just want to quickly show you as well, if we just sort of look how beautiful this cockpit is. I mean, here's a few pieces. I've sort of glued a few pieces on here, and then I'm going to spray that up separately later. These are the walls of our cockpit, and as we go along, we've got all these absolutely beautiful pieces, loads and loads of bags and bags of detail. We've got our seat here as well, absolutely stunning. Now with this cockpit, it is a bit sort of complex. Right, so I do recommend that you really sort of study the instructions, get the pieces out, and just do little segments of the build. Right, don't just come along, put everything together, and just think you can just glue it all together, spray it, and then somehow try and get in there and paint all the tiny little bits of details and everything. Really is a good idea to sort of look how it goes together, look at what colours are involved, because we've got interior green, we've got sort of like natural metal finishes, we've got black bits. You know, you want to spray those base coats sort of separate, and all these little pieces, so as you know, we can then paint it, weather it, and then when we bring it together, it's going to look amazing, because you're just not going to be able to get to certain areas of this if you just glue it all together. Which then brings us to our pilot. So with our pilot, hopefully you can see I've just started putting on some photo etch. Now with the pilot, you're going to make a decision here. I'm not totally 100% sure whether you can put the pilot in and out at will, but the photo etch is, you've got two separate bits of photo etch. You can either have the photo etch that is going to go on our pilot like this, just to have him in to have him in the cockpit, and then there's another set of photo etch. If you're not going to have a pilot in, it's got a little bit more photo etch in there to sort of show it off without a pilot in there. So you've kind of got to make a decision. I've decided to go with having the pilot in, because if you look through the instructions, you'll also notice that you can have this kit in, well, you can basically, there's screws for the landing gear, so you screw the landing gear in, you can have it on all threes, and you can have your pilot in and everything, but you can also unscrew your landing gear, you get a second set of landing gears with this kit, and then you can screw them in the closed position, and you've got a stand and everything, so you can have it in an in-flight display. So I'm kind of thinking, if I have the pilot in, you got to have a pilot if it's in an in-flight display. Someone's got to be flying it, and I don't mind having a pilot in there while it's on the ground. So I'm going to whack the pilot in now. With this, right, we've got this bit of photo etch, and this is rather cool because this is going to give us that sort of look as though he's got harnesses on and stuff. I've already glued the one in. Now I've already glued the first one in for a reason. If we try to sort of try and bend this into shape and just sort of glue both of them down at the same time, you know, it's you've got that seesaw effect where you try and glue one end down, but then the other end pops up, and you know, you've got that seesaw thing going on. So you glue one down, let that dry, and then we'll glue the other. Now what you want to do first is you want to sort of shape it, okay? So you want to sort of bend this, push it down. You can use your fingers just to bend it and mold it to the actual pilot itself, right? And once you've got it sort of bent into shape, you can come along and glue this down, which this one has sort of just come up, but no worries, we'll just glue that into place. Just to get it to glue down quicker, I'm going to use good old laser bond, right? So I'm just gonna, I may as well just almost completely take this off. We'll get a bit more laser bond this side, right, and then we can sort of press that down, right? And as I say, glue one side first. Let's get this light on. I can just hold it. That's the one thing about laser bond, is you've sort of got to, you know, you could almost need about 3 hands, but that's basically glued down, and then you just want to hold that around like so, and then basically repeat what I've just done there, but over here, right? Once you've sort of left this light on long enough for it to nicely cure and glue it into place, then do the same this side as well. And then it is kind of best if we just leave the pilot. Problem is with the pilot, we want to have his hands on the right sort of the joystick and all this kind of stuff, and really we need the cockpit to actually be together as one. So really it's best if we sort of spray, do all the cockpit, sort of bring it together, put the pilot in, and then we can maneuver his hands right in the perfect position, and then glue his arms and that into position, and then we'll sort of like spray up and paint up our pilot here. Then we can bring it all together. So I'm just going to leave the pilot to one side and concentrate on the cockpit.